Hey, what's up? Serpentine here, checking out the action role-playing game Bombshell, developed by Interceptor Entertainment, the same guys behind Duke Nukem 3D Reloaded, as well as numerous ports and remakes from the catalogue of Apogee Software. Bombshell, being their first original IP, takes some cues from the Duke Nukem series they previously worked on, as Bombshell itself was actually meant to be Duke Nukem Mass Destruction. However, after a lawsuit between Gearbox Software, Interceptor Entertainment had to rework it into their very own original IP.
We've cracked the code to the car's portal technology. We found a way to the planet Eater.
I think I'm gonna have to call you back.
We're preparing to launch a ground assault.
Yeah, looks like you're not the only one.
We want you to be the tip of the spear, Shelley.
This tip's a little preoccupied right now.
I know you're angry, but you can't obsess over the past. This isn't the time.
Couldn't agree more.
What was that?
The gameplay in Bombshell has you trailing behind Heskels after his minions have abducted the president and the president's daughter from the White House. Heskels has free run through the area, but you're going to have to take to exploring the area thoroughly to be able to progress through the numerous locked doors blocking your way. Heskels' minions are still hanging around too, along with some of the planet's more hostile creatures, so you're going to have to fight your way through the level. Available in your arsenal to take on the hordes are numerous different types of guns, all of which are incorporated into Bombshell's mechanical arm and have witty puns as their names, like the Mother Flacker and the Maxi Gun as opposed to a minigun. You only have one gun to start off with, but will slowly begin to acquire more and more as you continue on, ending up with a total of 8 guns, including a rocket launcher, machine gun, flak gun, and more. These weapons will start off fairly standard, however through each weapon's skill tree, you can increase their damage and eventually pick an alternate fire for it that increases their effectiveness exponentially, filling your screen with explosions while in use. Accompanying your arsenal are a couple of consumables as well that can be used to great effect. The two most important and most frequently used include the bowling bombs that will find and track to the closest enemy before detonating and dealing a bunch of damage. The second being health kits. Although you'll rarely use them except in boss fights early on, they become extremely important though in the later stages of the game, sometimes burning over 10 in just one fight. Aside from your guns, you have 4 abilities that you can use in and outside of combat, including a dash that can get you out of a tight spot, but ultimately becomes useless once you get the second ability unlocked that combines the dash with an attack without any real disadvantage. Then you have the bubble shield, that is an extremely powerful ability that will absorb all incoming damage up to a point and is almost a necessity in the later stages of the game. And the final ability, giving Bombshell an energy sword able to dart from enemy to enemy, dealing massive amounts of damage, making easy work of large hordes of enemies. Each of these abilities work on an energy system, draining energy on each use, and using skill points that you receive via leveling up, you can increase the power of these abilities individually, as well as reducing their energy cost. Switching between them all is a little bit clunky provided through this weapon wheel. At least 1 or 2 of the abilities could have been tied to one of the unbinded keys on the keyboard like F or G for easier ability alternating. The different enemies you'll face are a mix of Heskels minions. These armoured grunts with jetpacks that aim to swarm you but ultimately aren't that big of a challenge by themselves, especially when they jetpack off the map. Then there are the local enemies to the planet, which there are some similarities between them all, like on the planet falling into the sun, you have small bugs that will explode acid on contact. On the ice planet you have bugs that will explode ice projectiles, and on the World Eater you have spiders that will latch onto you and deal small amounts of damage. The other enemies though are fairly unique in both their look and their attacks. For every planet there is also a boss fight associated at the end with massive creatures and entities to defeat. Unfortunately though, these boss fights are pretty underwhelming due to a couple of reasons. One reason being that one of the fights, or most of the action, is happening off screen as you keep your distance, and the AI makes no attempt to close that distance in a timely manner, so you can just snipe from the edge of the map. The other reason is that they consist of the exact same gameplay as the rest of the game, as you run around in circles holding down the fire button and not much else. With the ability to dash, I was really hoping for some fast-paced combat that had you picking the right opportunities to attack and deal damage, but they really do just feel flat, not to mention that the time between each boss fight is a little bit on the long side of things. As for what you'll be doing in these long drawn out lulls between boss fights is basically fetch quests to open doors. Fetch quests that send you to each corner of the map, and the maps aren't that small. Even with the ability to dash around, it still feels the maps are just too big for the content available in them, spending half your time running back and forth. It could have worked if there were some more mini bosses that you encountered along the way to break up the monotonous exploring, but at the moment there are just way too many times that you'll just be spamming the dash ability, attempting to get to the end of the level. Things do change a bit in the final few hours of the game, however, introducing a lot more puzzle elements into the gameplay centered on your ability to take off your robotic arm and moving it to places that Bombshell can't get to. A mechanic that would have made the previous two areas of the game a lot more enjoyable and felt like I was actually using my brain instead of just holding down the fire button and circling enemies. Overall, the gameplay is severely lacking in variety, even though in the later stages it shows glimpses of what the game could have implemented throughout. The boss fights were also a big disappointment, being extremely spread out, and when you did enter a boss fight, it was just a really average experience. Gaining alternative fire modes for your weapons is pretty cool for the first couple of minutes, but quickly just becomes big explosions everywhere, filling up the entire screen.
Of course. That's what this crystal is used for. Opening the door. That's material.
The characters in the game, especially on the enemy's side, look pretty good and stand out pretty well from the environment, while still maintaining the look of being local to the area. The piloted mechs in the World Eater are some of the best looking characters and most intimidating as you go to fight a massive mech. Unfortunately, the gameplay associated with them isn't all that great. The environment is one of the best parts of the game, being extremely detailed and done really well, particularly once you enter the World Eater with its shiny metallic surfaces. The ice planet also contains some really interesting environmental features like large metal knights found around the level and interesting ancient ruins. As for the game's various effects, explosions are the most common thing you're going to see, and while they are well done, seeing the same effect time and time again does dull on the effect. Other than that though, there isn't too much that really stands out. The soundtrack to the game is a really blood-pumping assortment of heavy metal and over-the-top instrumentals that really does suit the game's tone almost perfectly, but it can be a bit overwhelming in some areas, even just blaring over the top of dialogue, so I suggest maybe going into the sound options and turning it down just a tiny bit. The voice acting in the game is pretty average for every other character except Bombshell herself, which is actually really well done. A lot of the characters you'll run into though sound like they just pulled someone from the office into the recording booth, and is really jarring up against all the personality portrayed from Bombshell's voice actor. Even with her good voice acting, there are only a few lines of dialogue she will say during combat that will loop. There are a couple of breaks from this every now and then, but it is on a very rare occasion.
Bombshell! Madam President! Guys!
That new prosthetic of yours must have cost you an arm and well, just an arm.
Heskels.
The story surrounding Bombshell is fairly loose, with the main driving force being that the President and the President's daughter have both been abducted and stolen away to another planet. The story arc, however, is left partially unresolved, with no real reason or need for the abduction, made even more apparent when Heskels' World Eater is revealed later on. The connection between Heskels and Bombshell is actually fairly interesting, although the game still doesn't explain some elements or reasoning. It's by far the most intriguing story plot in the game, even though there are some pretty big reveals, but they ultimately land flat and feel a little bit forced, like they were desperately trying to make the story interesting. Other features of the game include some interesting graphics options specific to high-end Nvidia cards, specifically a GTX 960 or above, enabling some fancy ambient occlusion, physics, and turbulence features. The game also comes with a digital game manual that you can read through, giving you more insight into the backstory of the game and the characters involved. The game also has controller support, although it's not great and is extremely difficult to aim with, so I highly suggest just playing it with keyboard and mouse. Altogether, Bombshell receives an average rating. Almost everything about the game, except the game's environment art, is just average. The gameplay showed it was capable of more than just a brainless slog through, although beautiful, content-empty environments, but only in the final hours with its numerous puzzles. The voice acting of some of the characters is extremely jarring due to its poor quality compared to the game's main characters, most lacking any personality at all. If you absolutely love action RPGs, then maybe Bombshell is worth a look, otherwise you'll most likely find Bombshell lacking. Anyway, that's my review for Bombshell. The game released on the 29th of January and is available to purchase via Steam for $34.99 or your regional equivalent. If you want to find out more about the game, check out the links below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.